right, we are back for session number 2 of the 14 apostles, and we're going to cover this week Andrew and Peter. Okay, if you'll remember, last week we did a intro to first century Israel. We looked at geography, geology, meteorology, which is the weather. We looked at agriculture, a little bit of business. We'll talk some more about that today. We looked at doing, how their housing structures were set up, and their kind of their city streets and stuff. We talked about that a little bit, and we talked about the size. Right, we're in Texas, and we kind of have this notion like I'm traveling to Garner State Park this weekend, and that's 6 or 7 hours one way, and I'm still in the middle of Texas, still right in the, still I'm not even at the border. I'm still in the middle of Texas. So we kind of had those kind of ideals in our minds, but when we looked at it, it was, the Sea of Galilee is really only 7 miles wide and 13 miles long. The perimeter is 33 miles around. Just a 2-day hike, probably, and it's 100 miles basically from Capernaum or Capernaum, however you're pronouncing it, around the Sea of Galilee, down the Jordan River, and then from Jericho up into Jerusalem. It's about 100 miles, and that would be a week hike to do that. I just did spring break, coincidentally, 106.7 miles in 7 days. It's 15 miles a day, so I know it can be done. Now, I didn't have goats and donkeys in tow. I didn't have, little tiny babies that I was trying to chase down, whatever. So we were kind of booking it, but our society is not used to the whole idea of walking everywhere, especially not here in Texas. We want to drive, get in the car and drive. Okay. So tonight we're going to cover Andrew and Peter, and I bundled them together because they're brothers, and it's important for us to contextualize who these people were. It wasn't just the original 12, weren't just 12 gentlemen that he randomly found on his way out of the Starbucks, and just randomly tapped people on the shoulder. He purposefully found these people and tapped them to come along with him. Now, I misspoke on the website last week, so I've corrected it on the YouTube link. But it's bradflight.com/the-14-apostles. And I don't have anything. I'm behind on that, so don't go there right now. But hopefully next week I'll have it updated, and it'll have the first 3 sessions, and I'll have this stuff up there for you and all that kind of stuff. You can go through and look at these pictures and graphs and stuff. So that's going to be where everything's going to be its home spot for all the stuff that we're doing this summer. Okay. So again, there's nothing there right now to speak of. It's just kind of a placeholder. I'll work on that. I got one more trip, and then we're kind of home for the summer. So I'm kind of excited to go, but also kind of ready to get back into a regular routine. Got to get to the gym on a regular basis. All right. So we talked about geology of how the rocks, and we talked about the plant life and the rainfall, right? Yeah. And how there's more rain up north, and the further and further south you go. Come on in. There's more and more rain the further south you go. It's more and more rain the further north you go. It's drier the further south you go. And we also talked about how the springs, because of the type of rocks that are there, when it does rain, it goes into the ground and it kind of comes down and then it pops out at different layers. So you can go back to the website and look at that stuff. I don't have it on there right now, but I'm going to be posting that. Last week is going to be on that website. You can also find last week's study on YouTube as well, if you want to find that. Glad you're here.
Andrew was the first approached by Jesus to ask to come along.
He was, and we're going to talk about that actually. It's interesting. Andrew is an interesting character. So let's remember where we are. Okay, so geography tells us Jesus was, remember, raised in Nazareth. He wasn't born there. He was born in Bethlehem. Right? And then he escaped to Egypt. And then when he returned, they were going to return to Bethlehem. And they found out that it was still one of the Herod family members were still in charge. So they said, no, I think we're going to go out to the country. So they...
Crappy way to live back then. Think about that. Uprooting all the time.
On the run.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. And then this is Tiberias. Remember from last week, I had that picture where it was the left side and the right side. You could see where the water left the Sea of Galilee, went to the Jordan River. That was from Mount Tiberias, which is right there. So that picture was looking this way and then looking this way. And you could see where the water was coming out of the. So that's where that picture was. Okay. And so that is about midway on the west side. Capernaum is right up in here. It's basically the northwest corner. If circles have a corner, which they don't, but it's the northwest corner of the Sea of Galilee. Okay. Now remember, we're only 40 or 50 miles from the Mediterranean Sea. We're not talking huge distances. Okay. When you look at the shoreline around this, it's 33 miles. You look at Lake Conroe. Lake Conroe is similar, not exactly, similar in height and width. But it has more miles of shoreline because it has all the coves that come in and out. But if you can imagine, it's not much different than kind of the length and width of Lake Conroe. Okay, so wrap your mind around. We're not talking about, this is not Lake Superior up way up north, one of the Great Lakes or anything like that. This is.
They don't even call it a sea over there, do
they call it Lake. You get arrested.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I don't know when it started getting called the Sea of Galilee.
I think that was one of the early European scholars ascribed that name to it because of its importance in the narrative of the Bible, not because of its size.
You just think there's still people that's making a living fishing out of that?
Yeah, it's supposedly like one of the most fish-rich bodies of water that's not the ocean. Yeah. And remember, what do we say? It was like 400 feet below sea level. It's the lowest place, except for the Dead Sea, which is even lower.
And the depth of it is 150 feet? What's the depth of that?
I think the middle goes down to like 400 feet.
Oh, really?
But like the average was like 150 feet deep.
I know the fish is tilapia, and they call it St. Peter's fish.
We're going to look at some of that today, too. So let's get into it. Let's continue here. So we talked about this, right? Last week I showed you the quote-unquote cool, the relatively cool Mediterranean air. And then we talked about this is basically 700, I said 450, 700 feet below sea level. So it's the lowest freshwater lake on the face of the planet. And it gets really, really hot. Now, if you remember in the narrative in the Bible, multiple times, it mentions he removed his outer garment. He removed his cloak. He removed his tunic or whatever. That's because he's sweating his butt off. It's really hot. It's a desert environment, and they are in a very, very low area. So think about this. Let's do reverse engineering, okay? When you go higher and higher, up on a mountain, the higher and higher you go, does it get hotter or colder?
Oh, yeah.
Colder. Why?
The air is thinner.
The air is thinner, and there's less molecules of air for the photons from the sun to activate and cause them to warm up. You tracking with me?
Yeah.
So if I go deeper and deeper, I have more molecules of air for the sun to activate.
So it's actually a heavier breathing.
So it's got to be more humid.
Yeah, more humid. There's more oxygen present, but it's also smoking hot. The same phenomenon occurs in the Grand Canyon, Palo Duro Canyon, any place where it has Death Valley, California.
When you get visit this place in the summertime that has a mountain and it's like hot as hell, 100 degrees, but you look up, there's snow on top of the mountain.
Mm-hmm.
I always love that.
That's last summer when I was backpacking in Colorado. We came across snow at 11,000 feet. 11,000 feet, there was snow up there still. It was July.
Now, but in the wintertime, even though this is kind of mild all year long, right? It's hot. Hot air rises, cold air is supposed, sinks.
Yep.
If it gets really cold at night or not?
Not really cold. It chills out. It chills down. Like deserts can get cooler at night. But what happens is, because this is relatively cool air coming off this ocean, again, like you just said, hot air rises, so that creates a vacuum. Okay, so if you have a pump and I pull up what happens to the stuff down here? Well, it has to pull that in. It causes a vacuum or a suction, right? So if hot air is rising because it has more air molecules that can be heated up by the sun, then that's going to rise really rapidly. And as that rises rapidly, that's going to cause a vacuum. So what has to come in? The cold air from here. The cold air rushes in, and when it hits that hot water, it just causes these storms to pop up. And so this is why we see the storm popped up on them, and they were out there, and Jesus, is walking on the water. He's like, "What are y'all freaking out about?" That kind of stuff.
This would be a typical thing that happened all the
yes.
time. So
yeah.
Why would they be freaking out more so this time? Is it because
that's the question? That's the question.
And you think about the boats, and like the boats we have now, we have deep V boats. Those were little boats. Those boats are like maybe.
Yeah, you're right. It says 141 feet deep. That's the average. 141 feet deep, 8 miles wide, 13 miles long.
This must have been a pretty wicked storm.
And the other thing that I would venture to guess is that they were out of the normal time when they would be out there, or they were physically or mentally or emotionally exhausted from what had just happened, and they weren't in the right mindset to tackle that normal storm, because it happens frequently. Boom, 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 boom. Okay. And that's also why it's a little bit greener up here relative to the lower area, because this acts like a machine that just continually cycles through these storms and brings rain across this area. Okay. You can see this is what's called tailings, and that's all signs of erosion. You don't have erosion unless you have water present. So, and that's where the agriculture area is around Sea of Galilee too, because they get rain. Okay. This is a view of Capernaum's over here. Remember, it was 1.5 miles of shore is basically Capernaum. And then this is where the Jordan River comes in, right here. And then right over in here, this kind of vicinity, this is called Bethsaida Zaki Reserve. I don't know. We don't know exactly where Bethsaida, the town of Bethsaida, is.
What does it mean?
Bethsaida, so Bethlehem, means house of the bread. Right? And Jesus said, "I am the bread of life," but he was born in the town called the house of the bread. This town is called House of the Fishermen.
Okay.
So I don't know that it was this far away from the shore if the name of the town is House of the Fishermen. I'm going to venture to guess it's probably somewhere in this area. It's going to be on the other side of the Jordan River. We know that.
It's not on a biblical map? Seems like it would be on biblical.
They have put some guesstimates of where they think it is. Yeah, if you go to the back of your Bible, it may say Bethsaida, but that's it. Sometimes we even have an asterisk because it's like we think it's probably here. Okay. One of the other ones that is in the Bible and Jesus actually teaches in is Chorazin. And that's right up here. So, we're like, oh, well, he left Capernaum. It wasn't like he got on I-45 and drove 4 hours to Dallas. Like this is a 2 or 3 mile hike. Okay. And then this is about a 2 mile to 3 mile hike. We're not talking huge distances when you consider. Okay. So we hear, and immediately they left and went to the boat. They went to the other side of the lake, and we're like, oh man, you got to go on 105 and come all the way across and go around, No, they just hike 3, 4, 5, 6 miles. No big deal. Lickety split, get it done. This is a view. If I was in the water on the Sea of Galilee, looking back towards a town like Capernaum or Bethsaida, from the water's edge, looking back towards the town. This is an artist's rendering of what it might look like. And what I want you to notice is it's pretty compact. And we talked about this last week. The majority of the people that are in Israel are huddled around Jerusalem. These are outlying areas. This is where we're talking about Capernaum, Bethsaida, Chorazin. That's Montgomery, Cut and Shoot. Those are nothing little towns, right, out in the middle of nowhere. And so they're going to be kind of cloistered up together, and then you'll have some like little farmers or shepherds or whatever kind of around, and that's it. There's not this sprawling metropolis. Even today, there's not a sprawling metropolis. Let's go back to that. Where is that? Even today, you can see here, This is not a sprawling metropolis of towns. There's a little bit here. They got a little center of town here. Amnon's got a little center of town here. Chorazine's a dot on a map. Capernaum has a long, skinny, but I wouldn't call that a bustling metropolis, right? So we have to understand the context of where these guys are. Now, if you'll remember, this is a picture of them pulling fish in. If you'll remember, around the first century, around the time that Jesus was there growing up and living, because he only lived 1 century, this north part of the lake is heavily involved in fishing, as you mentioned, Chris. Heavily involved in fishing. And it still is today, heavily involved in fishing. Here's the deal, though. They also have trade that they're doing because of their location. They are on what we call the Via Maris. Okay, we'll come back to that in a minute. Also going on the Jordan River is where you would go to meet people and you would go to interact with kind of special social gatherings. So if you were like, hey, we're going to have a family reunion, okay, well, let's just hike a couple of miles. We'll go to the Jordan River there right as it comes into the Sea of Galilee because there's shade, there's some trees. We can kind of stand in the water or whatever. Or if you're at the south end of the lake, you would go in there. And actually there's some spots between the south end of the lake and the Sea of Galilee, that part of the Jordan River. There are 3 spots where Elijah had different things going on, and then we see Jesus kind of mimicking those same activities, and John the Baptist was actually involved in some of those too. So the river was kind of like, hey, we're going to go cool off, or hey, we're going to get away from town. We're going to go spend the day here, or spend a couple of days here, or whatever. It was their little vacation spot. Now, we think of river, we think of the Brazos or the San Jacinto or the Trinity River or something like that, Mississippi River or whatever. This is Cypress Creek, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's not huge. He's standing up in there. It's maybe 2, 3, 4 feet deep. They still do. That's right. So when we hear that, when Joshua and the Israelites were coming into Israel for the first time to go take over the land, it says that they led first the guys carrying the Ark of the Covenant, which you talked about in Exodus last study. And when they touched the water parted so that they could go across on dry land across this. If you're having a drought, you could have it dry, right? But God purposely made it during the springtime when there would be the most flow going through there so that he could have the miracle of making the water part so they could go through again. But this is kind of what it looks like on a regular basis. And you would also have envoys and soldiers and policemen, guards from the temple and from the Roman government, from Herod, from Pontius Pilate, etc. They'd come out and just observe. They kind of sit back and lean against the tree, sit on their horse, and just kind of watch and see what's happening over there to see if this is somebody of importance, to see if is this person going to start stirring the pot? Is this person going to start making trouble? Or are they just hanging out here having a relaxing time? So they would rotate to come in and out. Those guards would rotate in and out to make sure that there was always somebody there watching. Okay. And then the Pharisees and the Sadducees and the Sanhedrin, which we're not going to get into all that today, but those are the religious groups, the leaders of the religious groups of the Judaism. They would normally send people out there as well because they wanted to make sure that A, people weren't sinning, and B, to keep an eye to see if there was anybody doing anything crazy, like a John the Baptist or a Jesus or an Elijah. Troublemakers, okay? Spiritual troublemakers, okay? So we see here on the Jordan River is where John the Baptist, and John the Baptist apparently doesn't know how to dress very well, okay? And that's what we see in the Bible too, that he had camel hair, all this kind of stuff. I know. It's high protein diet. But everybody's teeth would have been like that.
Everybody would have stunk. It's no big deal. Everybody stunk.
So I'm gonna say this, and I may get some hate mail from the people online watching, but when you think about bad teeth, I think about England. A lot of people in England have bad teeth.
To my client in England,
Uh huh.
she acted like I didn't know what I was talking about.
Yeah, yeah. They don't know. Like
Yeah.
it's not a thing for them.
Yeah, she's like, because she wanted to know some things about Texas. Is it true?
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Is it true about everybody owns cattle and horses? And she goes, "What do you hear about us?" And I go, "Well, I hear that everybody, the teeth thing." She goes, "What do you mean the teeth?" I hear that everybody has bad teeth over in,
Yeah.
in Great Britain. She goes, well, "I've never heard that."
I guess it's kind of like the accent thing.
Because when you live in it,
I don't have an accent. I have an accent. I know I do. But
Yeah.
people up north.
Yeah.
I try not to have one, but people up north, they don't hear their accent.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. So they're just
So they wouldn't know.
they don't recognize it, right? So anyway,
Early whites, they might be like, "What's going on with you?"
Jesus, the Jordan River is very important, right? Jesus was baptized in the Jordan River as a sign that here's my ministry. It's ready to start officially. We're going public. This is his spiritual IPO, right? He's going public here.
This is on the north side of
The baptism spot was actually closer down by Jericho.
Okay.
Yeah, but my whole point of bringing all that together is to understand the Sea of Galilee and the Jordan River is kind of like central to where Jesus, because that's where they traveled alongside of it. They were in it. They're baptized in it. They fished in the Sea of Galilee. I mean, that it's kind of central to their whole work. Okay, so the Lake Kinneret is the largest natural freshwater lake in the Middle East, south of Turkey. It's we talked about the size of it, right? Average depth with a maximum depth of 43 meters. The water level is 210 meters, the lowest freshwater lake in the world. So 700 feet below sea level, it said. 27 species live in the lake, belonging to 10 families of fish, which you talked about. There's all sorts of fish in there. Of these, 19 species and 8 species originating brought by people or escaped fish pools. So when you're like, hey, I have my my fish, my goldfish, and I'm kind of tired of taking care of my goldfish. I'm going to go dump it in Cypress Creek, and somebody else does the same thing, and your goldfish and my goldfish start having babies. Now I got a new population that wasn't there to begin with, and so that happens. Okay. Galilee Amnon is a fish, and it's the Galilee St. Peter's fish that you were talking about, right? So Galilee, like Galilee, right? Galilee. Jordan Amnon is the blue tilapia or Jordan St. Peter's fish. The longhead barbel, the large-scale barbel, the Hefaf Israeli, the Kinneret labnum, the low-eye cassif, the Kifon burri. And you can see, I'm just reading their names. You can see mullet, silver carp, right? So you've heard of carp. Okay, we got buffalo carp, and we got regular carp. And so fish, and there's common catfish, right? I mean, kind of fish are fish. Fish are going to, wherever they swim, that's where they're going to be.
But it's not kosher. What it said, it's not. It says it's catfish, but it's not kosher.
Catfish is not kosher because it's a bottom feeder.
Carp is also.
Carp's a bottom feeder. It's not kosher. Shrimp, crawfish, crab, lobster, none of those are kosher.
Good stuff.
What does kosher mean?
Kosher is so God commanded them, the Israelites, don't eat certain foods
Because it's not clean.
because it wasn't considered to be clean. So what they did was they said, okay, well, how do I know if this is acceptable? It was God in the Old Testament. And so then the rabbis said, okay, well, how are people going to know if this thing's okay for them to eat or not? So we will call it kosher. And kosher just simply means it's good to go. It's clean. It's good. It meets the biblical commandments to eat or not eat certain things. Now, it has now turned into a commercial labeling that a rabbi walks in the kitchen and goes, yeah, it looks pretty clean, kosher. Like, it's not as, I'm not saying it never happens, but it's less stringent than it used to be. The standards have changed. But yeah, and you think about it, like, and you weren't supposed to be eating pigs, Pigs kind of wallow in the mud and all that kind of stuff. And what you have to remember is they didn't have refrigeration. They didn't have air conditioning. They didn't have electricity. They didn't have running water.
But that was a good reason, actually.
And so those things weren't able to be cleaned and kept properly, and so it would make you sick or kill you. So it's not that we can't enjoy those. It's not that we can't enjoy those things. It's just God said, for your sakes, don't do those things, because I want you to be healthy and I want you to live. Okay? So we are not under compulsion to have to meet that standard. Now, if you decide, if you're like, you know what, that's a good idea, I'm not going to eat another crawfish in my life, well then get out. I'm just kidding. I love crawfish. But I mean, if you decide that you're not going to do something, then it needs to be because, you know what, I feel like that's something that I want to do, because there's nothing in the Bible that says don't eat crawfish. Because actually, in the New Testament, Peter has a vision, and a kind of a rug or a cloth with all these quote-unquote unclean animals are brought down, and God says, don't let this be an issue for you. If it's okay for you to eat it, eat it. Basically saying, like, if it's fresh, then go eat it. You know, like, he was trying to make it where it wasn't a big deal. So this is what the St. Peter's tilapia, the St. Peter's fish, this is what it looks like with a little bit of cabbage and some fries. That actually looks really good.
Yeah,
Long John Silver.
Long John Silver's. Okay. So it's just, and so you just catch thousands and thousands of those and you sell them. And that's what you do as a fisherman. Okay. They're not gigantic fish, but they're like that big, right? I mean, look at the plate, like that big. So if I got 100 of those things, then I'm talking, I'll start looking at 50 to 100 pounds of fish that I'm trying to pull in, right? So when you see the story about Jesus saying, well, cast your net on the other side, and then so we pulling it in, we had to have help, and it was lucky that we didn't rip the nets. They didn't break the nets. I mean, they must have had hundreds and hundreds of fish in those nets. This is what the market looks like. These are the smaller ones, but you can see these are right on there's the water right over there, and they're like, hey, come get some fish today. So you walk down there and you get some fresh fish. If you're in Galveston, you can go do the same thing. Yep, you can do the same thing. I've gone down there and gotten shrimp before. So that's pretty cool that you can do that. They still do that today. That's modern times. So here's Jesus. He actually takes Peter and Andrew, and he's preaching from the shore, and the crowd is getting closer and closer, and there's more and more, and he's kind of at the edge of the water. So he says, hey, Peter, can I use your boat? He's like, I'm trying to clean up for the day. He's like, no, I'm not going to take it out. Like, I just want to stand on your boat so I can preach. He's like, whatever, man. So he gets in, and he says, okay, just push away from the shore a little bit. And if you've ever been on a lake where you're a couple of, 20, 30, 40 feet from the edge, and you got kind of people sitting on the shore like that, your voice echoes off the water. So he created with Peter's boat a auditorium so that they could hear him, so they could listen to him teach. Okay. So here's this painting is called The Calling of Peter and Andrew. So before we get to this place, we can turn into our Bibles here. If you brought your Bible, you're welcome to open it up. I like to go to Luke. I'm sorry, Mark. I like to go to Mark and go to Mark chapter 1. He gets right into it. Chapter 1, verse 16. I'm using the Modern English Version. I have my other Bible here today. It's my ESV, Hebrew Greek Bible. But whatever version of the Bible you've got is what you've got, right? So just enjoy whichever one you've got. So Mark 1, verse 16. And so after John the Baptist was put in prison, Jesus went to Galilee preaching the gospel of the kingdom of God, saying time is fulfilled and the kingdom of God is at hand. So verse 16, as he walked by the Sea of Galilee, that doesn't mean he walked by it like, see ya, he's walking along the shore. When you look at the original, if you go back to the original Greek language, he's saying not walked by it, but walked along the Sea of Galilee. So he's walking along the shoreline. Now remember, we just looked at the geography, right? The Capernaum geography, how it's just this kind of shoreline. So he's walking along the shore. And we know where he's walking, right? So as he walked by the Sea of Galilee, he saw Simon and Andrew, his brother, throwing a net into the sea, for they were fishermen. And Jesus said to them, "Come, follow me, and I will make you fishers of men." Immediately they left their nets and followed him. And that's the end of it. Verse 16, 17, 18. I'm going to ask you a question. I'm going to ask you a real weird question. If I walk across the street to go to the Sonic over here, and I see some random dude sitting in his car chewing on a cheeseburger, and I say, "Hey, Bob, what's your name?" And he'll say, "Oh, it's Bob." I'm like, "Okay, great. Bob, come on. Let's go, me and you. Let's go." He's going to roll up his window and lock the doors, right? He's not going to come follow me. It doesn't make any sense. So we have to understand behind this what the context is, okay?
We've all thought that same thing, because the way, follow me.
Right.
Leave your businesses. Leave the way you support your family.
Correct.
Because Peter had a lucrative fishing business.
Yeah.
He had multiple boats.
Yep.
And, man, Jesus must have had a lot of charisma. He couldn't just be like a blow-joe.
No.
They would say get lost.
Yeah. So what we're missing, the context we're missing, is this idea. This is just another artist, some actors put together this thing. Jesus talking with his disciples here, and what we're missing is the context that in Judaism, you as a child, a male child, you went to Bible school. Let's call it Sunday school, but it was on every weekday basis. So weekday school, Bible school, Sunday school, whatever. Okay, and you studied the Old Testament, and you did that until you were 12. At 12 years old, you have your bar mitzvah.
The Old Testament, or do you think it's the Torah, the first 5 books?
I think some did the whole Old Testament.
Yeah.
Some just did the Torah.
Yeah.
But yeah, for sure the Torah. Everybody did the Torah.
We have an honor nowadays as Christians because we have the Old Testament and the New Testament.
Yeah, we do.
And then some of them only had a scroll of Isaiah.
Correct.
Anyway,
So they had, at 12 years old, the guys have the bar mitzvah and the girls have the bat mitzvah. And that just means welcome to adulthood. And what they're saying really is not that you're fully an adult. They're simply saying your body is changing, puberty, and you are now going to be held responsible for the decisions you make. When you make decisions as an 8-year-old and you throw rocks at a car being dumb and you break a windshield, it's not criminal intent. You're just being a stupid kid. At 12, though, you ought to know better.
yeah, that's true.
And so that's kind of where this 12 comes from. It's just 12 tribes, right? 12 is a number that's always in the Hebrew and the Judaism, right, in Israel. So we see here at 12, some of them who could afford it or who gained favor and earned kind of a scholarship would continue to 18 years old. Kind of that's the junior high school, right? And it would be for those who are wanting to advance themselves in the Torah or the Old Testament, the Tanakh, as it's called, Torah and Tanakh, or they just didn't want to go to work on dad's fishing boat or mom and dad's farm or whatever it was. So if they can afford it, I'm going to keep going to school. Okay. Most people, however, at this point left and started learning a trade. At 18, you would then officially be, you kind of graduate. They would then say 1 or 2 of you from the class. So if you had a dozen people in that 12 to 18-year-old class, 1 or 2 would be called out to say, "You're something special. Come, you're going to hang out with me. You're going to continue your studies so that you can become a rabbi like me. You're going to learn what I know, and we're going to go all the way to the end." So they're looking for the best, the brightest, the most intelligent, the smartest, maybe the most handsome,
The top gun.
the top guns, okay? So Jesus, that's the context that we don't know. Okay? And here we see Peter and Andrew, they're working. And what that tells us is likely they weren't in a disciple just means student-teacher relationship, learning, and a learner. They weren't being discipled by a rabbi. They were out in the workforce working. And so what that tells us, from all that the context of all the other scriptures and the other gospels, is that they weren't tapped to go to that next level. They were looked at as, you're kind of done. But Jesus walks up to them and says, your people, your rabbis, your teachers are done with you. I'm not. Come on. We got more to go. We got more to do here. So you don't understand that they just leave everything. It's not that they just leave everything. They had to leave the continued education of the rabbi to go to work at that point. And like you said, it was a good business. They were doing well, but maybe something inside of them, his charisma, the way he taught, the way he walked, the way he talked with them and interacted with them, he said, no. I know you got your business there. Great. But I want you to be with me. I want to bring you up underneath me as a disciple. And they felt like that was more important to them than their businesses and their whatever they were doing. Okay. We don't understand that when you just read that text, because when Mark wrote this in the first century, they still had that process going on. And so to his readers, they would have just understood that whole thing. But to you and I, today, 2,000 years later, we don't just read that and say, oh, they must have not been picked to be rabbis, and so they're going to go to work. And then they were picked by Jesus, so they must have thought, man, it's a special rabbi who's calling me something special and wants me to go, okay, this is an opportunity. I need to take this opportunity. All that's missed because we're not the original, not that we can't get anything out of it, but we're not in the original recipients of this original gospel. Does that make sense? Okay.
It still begs the question, if they, 12 years old, they started to go learn a trade of fishing, and they're 16, 17, 18 years old at this time?
Right.
Whenever Jesus gets them,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yep.
So they're 4, 5, 6 years into the trade. There's still hope you would think that, okay, I'm tapped in, my feet are on the ground here,
Mm-hmm.
and for them to just go and follow him, then there had been something going on in their hearts, there had been something going on in their minds, conversations.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Between each other.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to come to that in just a minute here. So this is, again, see, it says Bethsaida here.
Okay.
But we don't know for sure. I mean, that they just said it's probably about there-ish.
Okay.
But we don't know for sure. I tend to put it closer to the shore because the name means house of the fishermen.
Mm-hmm.
That makes more sense to me.
Makes sense, yeah.
Although, I'll put it to you this way. Have you ever heard of the last name Manning?
Yes.
Where have you heard that?
Peyton.
And?
Eli.
And?
Walter plus Walter Payton, sorry.
You ever heard of Archie Manning? He was the only guy to win 2 Heisman trophies.
How did that work?
He's the dad to Peyton and Eli Manning.
Yeah.
So when you're looking at that, you might say, wherever they are, that's the football, that's the town of the football guys, because they become great football players. Or even town of quarterback guys. Okay, that's the quarterback town. Okay, not that where they're from even has a NFL team or even a college team. It's just that particular. So there's a chance that for whatever reason, the good fishermen who know what they're doing, it's like in their genes, in their blood, may come from there. That's the only thing I can reconcile as to why that would be not closer to the shoreline. It's plausible.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that as a That's absolutely the reason. But I don't know why it would not be closer to here. And this river doesn't really flow enough. We saw that, right? I mean, how shallow the river is. It's the same coming in. It really doesn't have enough for them to even have boats to go up. It's not like going up the mouth, going up the Mississippi River or something. Like, you can't really take a boat up Cypress Creek. It's just too shallow and spots and all that kind of stuff. So that's my 2 cents as to why I think the town of the fishermen is there, is because the people who come from there is like best fishermen. You want a fisherman, you go to that place. Like that's the people. They know what they're doing. I don't know. I didn't name it, so
Yeah.
it's unfortunate I don't have any more information for you. This is some ruins in an area just in that spot there. So where they're calling Bethsaida, there are some ruins that overlook about a half a mile or 3/4 of a mile away the Sea of Galilee in the distance. So they're saying perhaps this is the town of Bethsaida. It's plausible. I don't know. I mean, it's not worth arguing, right? This is not a big deal. So here is an engraving, and let me give you some background. Andrew, in the book of John, let's turn over to John. John tells us about this. John 1:29. And John gets right into this too, okay? Luke is the one who does the whole Christmas thing, right? When we talk about Christmas story, we talk about Luke and a little bit in Matthew. John chapter 1, verse 29, okay? Now, if you'll look back in John chapter 1, verse 19, testimony of John the Baptist, but remember, Mark just told us that John the Baptist got put in prison. Okay, so they're lining up kind of in the chronological order of what's happening. Talks about John the Baptist, and then he starts talking about Jesus. Okay, so let's go to verse 29, John chapter 1, verse 29. The next day, John saw Jesus coming toward him. John the Baptist, that is, not John, the writer of the book of John. John the Baptist saw Jesus coming toward him and said, "Look, the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world. This is he of whom I said, after me comes a man who is preferred before me, for he was before me." So we don't have the time to unpack all of this because there's a whole lot right there. But John the Baptist is saying, you know, we have a Passover lamb that we kill and we paint the doorpost. That was supposed to save them from the angel of death. Well, this is the Lamb of God. Okay, so he's making a connection there. And then he says, takes away the sin of the world. Not just prevents you from getting killed that one night, but this is the one who is the Savior, who's that coming promised Messiah from Genesis 3:15. This is he of whom I said, after me comes a man who is preferred before me, for he was before me. He is speaking to, go back to John chapter 1, verse 1. It should be one page over, right? Or on the same page. It says, in the beginning was the Word, capital W, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. So talking about Jesus being with God before he became the flesh. The incarnation is what that is. Incarne in Spanish means flesh, meat. So incarnation means the indwelling in the meat. Well, I'm just saying a lot of people know Spanish though. So and so that's where that comes from, that like the carnival, right? The carnival is the celebration of the flesh.
Interesting.
I didn't know that.
I know that is.
Yeah, it's a celebration of the flesh.
Oh,
It feels good, looks good, tastes good, sounds good. Do you get that now?
Yeah.
You see, right? Celebration of the flesh.
Like carnal.
Like carnal. Carnal is also another word. Carnal is the intentions of the flesh.
well, what's carnosada mean?
Carne asada is like meat.
It's roasted meat.
Okay.
So carne is meat or flesh.
Okay.
Asada is roasted.
Yeah, I can see it.
Celebration of the flesh, like celebration of sin, or celebration of the flesh, like eating.
The word itself doesn't give us an intonation whether it's good or bad.
Yeah.
The word itself is just celebration of the flesh.
But I think there's a prophetic meaning there, though, like you're saying.
I tend to lean towards it devolves quickly into
Yeah, right.
into hedonism, but that's where it comes from. So Jesus is the incarnation. I'm in the flesh of human beings, but I'm God. He's the incarnation. Does that have some more meaning now?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, right? So he says here that this is he of whom I said, after me comes a man who is preferred before me, for he was before me. I did not know him, but for this reason I came baptizing with water, so that he might be revealed to Israel. So John the Baptist is saying, I know I've got some people following me, and y'all are calling me, you're my disciples. Like, that's cute, but this is the dude right here. Don't worry about me. That's the one. Okay? So when he says that, John bore witness, saying, I saw the Spirit descending from heaven like a dove, and it remained on him. And I did not know him, but he who sent me to baptize with water said to me, the one on whom you see the Spirit descending and remaining, this is he who baptizes with the Holy Spirit. And I've seen and have borne witness that he is the Son of God. So here we see the voice saying, this is my Son whom I'm well pleased, is the Son of God. Verse 35, okay? So we just saw John. I mean, if you're talking about theological rock and roll, like, right? Rock and roll. John the Baptist just played an amazing face-melting riff just here. Do you see that? He just knocked our socks off with that. But let's go to verse 35. Not there yet. Verse 35, and that's what this engraving is, says, again the next day, John the Baptist was standing with two of his disciples. Now, these are the people who are saying, I'm a disciple of John the Baptist. And remember, John's like, that's cute, whatever, but that's the dude over there. And he says, looking upon Jesus as he walked, he said, look, the Lamb of God. So he says it again to these two people who are his students. He says, there he is. That's the dude right there. That's the man. Let's go to verse 37. The two disciples heard him speak, and they followed Jesus. John the Baptist has people following him. He has influence.
Andrew was one of John the Baptist's disciples.
That's right. And that's what we're going to get.
Was one of the originals.
That's what we're going to get to right here. And so we see here that John the Baptist, you got me speaking to Andrew. John the Baptist, he's got influence, he's got notoriety. I don't even want to say fame, but he's got notoriety. He's got people following him. People are listening to him. He's got a following, and he says, it ain't about me. That's the dude. And two of those people go, oh, okay. And they're gone.
Can you imagine, though, the personality he must have had? Because of the way he looked. Most people would have thought he was crazy.
And maybe that's why they had so many people around.
Maybe so.
Okay. So verse 37, the two disciples heard him speak, and they followed Jesus. Verse 38, then Jesus turned, saw them following, and said to them, what do you want? What are we doing here, people? So he's like, what do you guys want? This is what he's like, what do you two want? This is an engraving of John chapter 1, verse 38. Jesus going, what's up, guys? Right? And they said to him, Rabbi, which means teacher. That's what it means. Rabboni means great teacher. But Rabbi, where are you staying? That's a weird question.
Yeah.
Hey, we were following this other dude, but he said that you're the dude, so we want to follow you. Where are you hanging out? Where's your hotel room? In modern day, we're going to say, okay, creeper alert. You guys, you can stay here. I'm going to keep on walking. Y'all are being weird, okay? But back then, remember, I mentioned this last time. There wasn't like Holiday Inn. There was no place to stay. When they said the Bethlehem, when they said there was no room in the inn was likely a 2 or 3 bedroom house that had a couple of extra spots for people. And that's it. Because remember, you would always stay as a guest in the first floor of somebody's house. Remember, we talked about that last week. You would stay in the first floor with the animals. But hey, you had a place, whatever. And so they were saying, where are you staying? And so why would they ask that? But Jesus, he plays along. What does it say in verse 39? Come and see. Come on. Let's go. Come and see. You want to see where I'm staying? Come on. So that was an invitation that the reason that they were doing this is, remember, they're hiking around, they're walking, and you go to the river, that's like a day trip or 2-day trip or whatever to the river. So he's in the river being baptized. John the Baptist said, there's the dude. These two guys say, okay, fine, we're going to follow that guy now. And now they just realized, we've just left our group. What do we got? We got to stay someplace. Where are you staying, Jesus? Do you have a place? Like, is there maybe some space we can lay down in the corner where you? And he says, you know what? Go on, guys. Let's go. Let's go see.
So the man has nowhere to lay his head.
So he invites them in. And, of course, we know he doesn't have a home. But he invites them in. And so we go to the second part of verse 39. So they came and saw where he stayed and remained with him that day, for it was about the 10th hour. The 10th hour would have been about 4 p.m. And it was probably too late for them to hike back into wherever their house was. So they were like, we're just going to have dinner. We're going to stay the night, and then we'll head out in the morning. No big deal. So verse 40, one of the two, so there's two of them that said they were going to follow Jesus now. One of the two heard John the Baptist speak and followed him, and heard John the Baptist speak and followed him was Andrew, Simon Peter's brother. So right there we know one of the very first people who followed Jesus, answered the call to come and see, is Andrew. Pretty cool. Andrew, Simon Peter's brother. So here we are introduced. Peter is the brother of Andrew. He first found his own brother Simon and said to him, we have found the Messiah, which means the Christ. Then he brought him to Jesus. He finds his brother, okay? He hangs out with Jesus, goes back into town, right? Back to Capernaum, where the boats are. They're from Bethsaida, but the boats are in Capernaum. That's where the docks are. And he immediately goes and finds his brother. Peter, we found him. It's the Messiah, the one that we've been learning about. We found him. He's right here. We know where he is. Actually, we stayed with him last night. We hung out. And when Jesus saw him, Peter, he said, you are Simon, the son of John. You shall be called Cephas, which means Peter. Now, Cephas, most people don't know this. Cephas, when you translate it, it means like a rock. Peter means rock. But not like the Rock of Gibraltar, like a rock. There's another word that means a mountain, like a gigantic boulder, and it's very similar, but it would be the same. The difference between saying, what are two things that are close together, but two different, like one word but two different things, like rocks and rocky. Rocks and rocky. Rocks are like, I got a handful of rocks. Rocky indicates I've got this terrain where it's kind of extended amount of rocks, but it's rocky like this. Is that kind of, so Peter means rock. But the other word that Jesus uses later, which we'll talk about another time, he actually says, what he's talking about, I'll just tell you right now. He says, what he says is, Peter, who do you say that I am? And he says, you're the Son of God. He said, bingo, you got that. And he says, Peter, hey, rock. Let's just say like Rocky Balboa. Okay? Hey, Peter, hey, Rocky, who do you say that I am? And he said, you're the Son of God. He's like, you got that right, Rocky. And on this rock, the foundation rock, the foundation stone, I will build my church. He's using a play on words. In English, it just puts the word rock or foundation upon this rock. And so particularly the Catholic Church during the Vulgate translation, when it was Latin, they translated it to say that we were going to build the church on the rock.
We got a rock in this church here.
We do have, his name is William Rock, yes. But we're building the foundation on the rock, not the rock.
Yeah, Peter, yeah.
It was a mistranslation. You see what happened there?
No.
So Jesus wasn't indicating that Peter was supposed to be who the church was built on. He was saying, I'm Jesus. I'm not, but I'm Jesus. So he's Peter and I'm Jesus. He said, Rocky, right? Little Rocky, who do people say that I am? You say, you're the Son of God. You're right, Rocky. And on this foundational rock, I'm going to build the church. Not on, you wouldn't build a building on a rock, would you? You wouldn't. You'd build it on a big foundational rock. And that's what Jesus was saying. Jesus is the foundation. All right. We talked about the storms. Let's flip over to there. We talked about the storms popping up on the Sea of Galilee. Wait, let me see.
I have a question.
Yes. Question.
Who was the other disciple? Do we know?
The disciple that Jesus loved
So
talks about himself in the third person.
Well, it was before that John was standing with two of his disciples, and then the two of his disciples left and went with
Right.
Jesus. That was Andrew and
John.
well, that was John the Baptist's disciples.
John the Baptist, but the writer of that book was John.
Oh, so John was saying that me and Andrew.
Correct.
Okay.
He always
So
writes
Andrew-
about himself in third person.
Well, if Andrew was the son of John, which John is that?
That's the dad of John, and that's the dad of Peter and Andrew. John was a popular. I mean, think about John today. I mean, there's John. How many Chris's do we have in Bible study? We got Chris Bradford, Chris Siegler, Chris Harvey, whatever, right?
Andrew means manly. In case you guys didn't know that.
I didn't know that, but I've heard that there's.
But Andrew means manly.
So my whole point of saying that is that dang, I just lost my train of thought. You got me sidetracked on manly. What were you saying now?
About the disciples. John
Oh yeah,
was one of
he
the
always
disciples.
writes about himself in the third person. He always writes about himself in the third person. He says whenever he and Peter, John and Peter were racing to the tomb, says the disciple that Jesus loved got there first. All right, where are we at for the walking on the water again?
Hey, like after the first, okay, we're talking about 12, right? 14.
Right.
The word disciple stops being used after this group of men. When the second generation disciples, they're called missionaries. They're not called disciples. That's strange.
That is interesting.
But I don't know why they were still following.
Yeah.
But the Bible won't use the word disciples after this group anymore. It goes to teachers and missionaries.
That is interesting. So here we are in Mark chapter 6. Flip over to Mark chapter 6. So Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. Matthew, Mark chapter 6. And we go to verse 45. Now, Mark, I find like Mark is like a newspaper writer. Because he's like, and then they went over here, and then the next thing you know, they're talking about this, and immediately they left over there, and they went over here, and then they're talking to the... I figure his kind of younger, kind of...
What's his name on?
Paul.
Yeah, Paul
and Barnabas. But here we are, Mark chapter 6. So they fed 5,000, and then look, verse 45. Immediately, right? He uses these loaded action words. Immediately, he compelled his disciples to get into a boat and go before them to the other side, to Bethsaida. So we know where they are. So they're on this side of the lake, and he says, go to the other side, go to Bethsaida, right? We have an idea where that is, right? So here, go to the other side, go to Bethsaida. Okay?
They're in Capernaum right now?
Yeah. So when he had sent them away, he departed to a mountain to pray. There's a mountain that is just behind Capernaum. It's a mountain. I mean, it's a hill. But there's a mountain up there that likely he would go to and pray. Nobody there. Like even today, there's nobody inhabiting the area. So he went to send them away. He departed to a mountain to pray. When evening came, remember, we're not talking about a gigantic body of water. When evening came, the boat was in the midst of the sea, or the lake, in the midst of the lake. He saw them straining at rowing. So Jesus is up on the hill saying, oh, look, there they are. Look how cute. Oh, man, that storm is really getting them. And look, they're down there rowing as hard as they can. Like, he's witnessing this from the mountain. And he saw them straining at rowing, for the wind was against them. About the fourth watch of the night, he came to them walking on the sea, and would have passed them by. And some translations, it actually says, he came walking to them on the water, intending to pass them by. That's what yours says? Yep. So it says, I'm intending to pass them by. Hey, guys. I think Jesus has a sense of humor, man. He really must.
Yeah, wouldn't you love to like been there?
Yes, I'd love to be there. Yes, everybody laughs.
You know, I loved it.
So he came to them walking on the water, intending to pass them by. But when they saw him walking on the sea, they supposed it was a ghost and cried out. What a bunch of weirdos! I mean, how many times have they been on this water? How many times have they been in a storm? How many times have they had to fight in rowing and bring the sails down and bail the bucket of water out of there and all that stuff, right? This is not the first time. These are seasoned guys. They've been out there. They grew up. They're from the town of fishermen. And yet they see this guy walking on the water who just made a miracle with 12 baskets overflowing extra of bread and fish. It's right. What does it say? What's the first word of verse 45?
Immediately after this, okay.
Immediately. So they just saw Jesus do this amazing miracle. That night. They did this amazing miracle. And then Jesus is like, oh, man, that was awesome. Guys, wasn't that cool? I got 12 extra baskets. That's so cool, man. All right, well, you know what? I'm going to go take some time to pray. Y'all just go ahead and go to Bethsaida. I'll be meeting with you guys a little later. Okay? It's a couple miles, right? A couple miles around the edge of the lake. And they just witnessed him doing this miracle, feeding the 5,000. And they're in the boat, and they have a storm, which is not their first time to be in a storm. And yet they see this guy walking on the water, and their first thing is to say, it's a ghost.
You ever thought about that little statement right there? They thought it was a ghost.
Yeah.
So just think how superstitious people had to be back then.
Yes.
To say that.
Yes.
Because we wouldn't say nothing like that. We wouldn't. You ever think we're high on something?
You're right.
But for them to say it was a ghost, what was going on back then?
I don't know.
So there were sorcerers, right?
Yeah.
So it just makes you wonder. That's
Yep. So we're in Mark 6. We're down here now in verse 49. But when they saw him walking on the sea, they supposed it was a ghost, and they cried out, for they all saw him and were troubled. Okay? So these guys are freaking out. He just utilized them to do an amazing miracle, and now they're freaking out. Verse 50, for they all saw him and they were troubled. Immediately he spoke to them and said, be of good cheer, it is I, do not be afraid. Also, you'll hear in some translations it'll say, peace, do not be afraid. My translation is, guys, chill out.
Do we know if this was at night? Because they fished at night.
Yeah, it was. It's at night. It's in the fourth watch.
Gotcha.
Up here in verse 48, about the fourth watch of the night. He came to them, walking on the water, intending to pass them by. I love that.
So it had to be a very moonlit
And what was Jesus doing up?
night, to see. And they had to be
He said he was going to meet him. Y'all guys go there and say, I'll be over there in a little while.
They could have been far off the shore.
And it's not a huge lake.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
And you see, Jesus, go back up here. Verse 47. Or verse 48. He saw them straining at rowing, for the wind was against them about the fourth watch of the night. He came to them walking by the sea. Jesus is watching them down there struggling.
It had to be pretty lit, too. The moon must have been out, full moon. For him to see him from the top of the hill.
I'm guessing, but I don't know. Anyway, let's continue. So my translation for what Jesus says to them in verse 50 is, guys, whoa, everybody just take a chill pill. Just relax. Not sure why y'all are freaking out. Just everybody chill, okay? Then verse 51. Then he went up to them in the boat, and the wind ceased. And they were greatly astonished in themselves beyond measure and wondered. For they had not comprehended the miracle of the loaves, for their hearts were hardened. Now there is probably more insight into what was happening than actually them being scared by a ghost and having troubles at the storm. They didn't feel what Jesus was hoping, I don't think, that they would feel. I'm thinking he was thinking, I'm going to do this miracle. It's going to be awesome. And they're going to be like, dude, this is the Son of God. It's awesome. But instead, they were like, whew, okay, we got that crowd fed. Okay, what's next, Jesus? What are we doing?
Forgetting this statement.
Yeah. And he was like, all right, you guys go across to Bethsaida. I'm gonna chill out for a little bit here. And then he intended to pass them by. I don't think he was upset, but you could almost kind of be in like, you guys, and just kind of walking, intending to pass them by. But Jesus didn't have, throw hissy fits or have, he did throw a fit in the temple. But so then there's another time when they're in the boat and Jesus comes walking to them on the water. And that's what this picture is. That's where they said, Jesus, is that you? And he was like, it's me doing the same thing you've seen me do before. I walked on the water. And so Peter, he likes to act before he thinks, which I'm pretty associated with that. He says, Jesus, if that's really you, tell me to come out there with you. Jesus was like, come on. And so as long as he was looking at Jesus, it says that he was walking on the water. Guys, do y'all see this? Whoa! And then he started feeling the wind and the waves, and he started looking around, and he's like, oh, man, I'm in the middle of a storm still. And he took his eyes off of Jesus, and he started to sink down. And so Jesus is saying, Peter, seriously, dude? Quit worrying about all the other stuff. Just focus on me right here. Eyes up here. Come on, man. What are you doing? And he got distracted by the world around him. Okay? So,
It's a brilliant picture of this life.
yeah, it absolutely is. And so then there's another image that I love, and that image is a picture from Peter's perspective. Jesus pulling him up out of the water. All right? There's Jesus pulling me up out of the water. This is Peter's perspective. And you know what? That's our perspective, really. My wife and I have this picture hanging up in our house.
Yeah. Many times.
Yep. And you know what? It's our fault. I took my eyes off of him. I took my focus on the things around me.
Then you start sinking.
And I start sinking. He's always got his hand out. Peter was not the guy who the Pharisees, the rabbis, that they looked to. Peter was, you can see later when Jesus is being on trial, being put on trial, and they're warming themselves around the campfire, and Peter's talking, and they're like, you got one of them Galilee accents. You must be one of them Jesus followers. And he said, I ain't no Jesus follower. I ain't ever seen that dude in my life. He bailed out. That's when he starts denying. But they said they called him out because of his Galilean accent. So he'd be like, he from the country. So the Pharisees, they're not looking to people like Peter and Andrew. They're not looking to those people to be leaders. They're not looking for those people to be.
I think that's why Jesus chose them.
That was my whole point.
You can't teach a dog old tricks. What's that saying? You can't teach a dog old dog new
Teach
tricks.
an old dog new tricks.
Just think about the Pharisees and how callous they were.
Yep.
They were uppity. They were haughty. They looked down on people. Jesus didn't want that.
That's right.
He wanted people that are teachable. If you're not reachable, you're not teachable.
That's right.
Using the foolish to confound the wise.
Yeah. That's a great phrase. I love that.
The reason why he wanted this group.
Yeah. Now, there's a little interaction here. If you'll notice, what's the first thing Andrew did? Where did he go?
Good. Well, after he followed him?
After he followed Jesus. To his brother.
Yeah. Andrew.
Yeah, Andrew said
He was telling somebody.
he was telling somebody. Okay? So Andrew is a evangelist. He's going to tell people about Jesus. He's going to try to lead them to Jesus. The other thing I want you to note is this. They're brothers. Based on what we know, which one do you think is the younger brother and which one's the older brother?
That's a good question. I'd have to think about it.
I think Peter's the older brother.
I would say Peter's older.
What do you think?
It
I-
just, Andrew sounds like older.
Yeah,
Oh,
But Andrew's going to tell him, I'm going to go tell my big brother, I'm going to go tell my big brother.
that's where I'm coming from. Again, I don't know that we have
Do we
biblical
know-
inspiration to know one way or another, but I'm
do we know Peter's not
guessing.
more immature?
well, but he's a hothead, not that he's just immature. I'm not saying that he is not immature. He is immature, but I think he's more of a hothead than he is immature. I see Andrew being, I'm the younger brother, and I'm checking out all these other cool things. Oh, look, there's John the Baptizer over here, and there's whatever. And Peter's like, whatever, dude, we got to get to work. Like, I don't know. That's just this feeling I get.
You're right. Because Peter had to lead a boat.
Right. And so, again, there's nothing in the Bible that says, I don't think, that for sure that Peter is the older one. But I kind of get this impression that Peter was the older one. And Andrew, the first thing he does is he goes, I got to go tell my big bro about this. You could see a younger brother doing that, especially when he looks up to him. Because Peter may not have been somebody that the Pharisees would have been looking towards, but he was doing good at business, like you talked about. And he wasn't afraid to throw a fist if he had to. I mean, we see when they come to arrest Jesus in the garden, he pulls a guy's sword and he cuts his ear off. I mean, he's like, let's go, man. Let's go.
Making a living on those shores of Galilee, that'd be a tough breed.
Yeah.
Think about it.
Yeah.
It'd have to be, because you're away from home for weeks at a time. You're working with scoundrels. So you're tough. By nature, you're tough. Hey, you know
Who's to say
what?
they're not twins?
They could be. They could be.
You don't tell us that, though.
We don't have that information. So we see this is an example where they're on the boat and he says, throw the net to the other side, right? And that's what got Peter. Do you remember that story?
Mm-hmm.
He said, we've been fishing all night. And Jesus says, hey, did y'all catch anything? They're like, no. Like, oh, man, that stinks. Well, did you try putting your net on the other side of the boat? He's like, dude, we've been fishing all night. There's nothing out there. Like, try that side of the boat. Try the other side. And you can see Peter like, okay, I want to prove that guy wrong. Let's go. Let's go. Guys, throw it out. So throws it out. And then that's where they get that huge catch. And that's where Peter, I can see Peter, they're trying to pull it in, and Peter going, who is this dude? For real. Like, this got to be something. What is going on with this guy? Let's get this fish in here. And then he has the biggest haul that we have on record, maybe the biggest haul of his life there on the shore. And he walks over to Jesus and he goes, I'm in. Let's go. What's next?
So is this before, what chronology, you may get to this, I don't want to go too fast, but chronologically speaking, at what point in this whole situation does Jesus approach them and say, come and follow?
So what we were looking at, when you look at the Gospels, that story of the throw the net on the other side is in this Gospel, but it's not in this one.
Okay.
So he's saying, throw the net out here, come follow me. Mark just said, come follow me. He skipped that.
But this is after even John the Baptist introduced Andrew
Correct.
to Jesus.
Correct.
So they kind of knew of Jesus.
Right.
Well, John the Baptist told them who he was.
Correct.
And then days following, they were kind of
Yes.
back
It happened in a short order, apparently. Because when he was writing, it said, and immediately the next day, and immediately the next day. So it was like this kind of...
It was after the loaves and fishes that he said, come follow me.
No.
It was before.
Loaves and fish. This was before loaves and fishes.
This is getting started.
Yeah. Yeah, so the timeline is Jesus shows up, and his first miracle on record is the turning water into wine. And that's in Cana of Galilee, which is, if Capernaum's here, Cana of Galilee is kind of over in here. Not far from Nazareth, really. So kind of in that northwest.
I wasn't.
And so then from there, he goes down to Jerusalem to a festival, Jesus does. And on his way back, he was coming back, he stops by John the Baptist. And that's where he gets baptized. And then John the Baptist goes, that's the guy right there. Not me, that guy. And so that's when they followed him back the Jordan River back to Capernaum. And the first thing he does is says, hey, big bro, we found him. This is the dude.
So the wine was before the disciples
Mm-hmm.
were the part of the picture.
Oh, wait. Hold on.
The wine was out.
No, it's after. It's after. It's the first one after they're together. That's what. I'm sorry. Yes.
It's the first miracle.
It's the first miracle on record. Yeah. My bad. I apologize.
No. I want to, because I've always been fascinated at like what the timeline is.
Yeah. And so this is it's like I said, Peter, he's a hothead. He pulls that sword out and he cuts the guy's ear off. And Jesus goes, no. It's okay, Peter. Just relax. As a matter of fact, you know what, dude? Put your ear back on. I'm sure that guy was going, we're going to arrest this guy?
Yeah.
He just glued my ear back on. But Peter, you see Peter over here. He's like, I'll cut you again, man. Once we get to the understanding that Peter becomes a leader of the group, Jesus is still, we don't have the group without Jesus, right? So Jesus is the foundation. But it doesn't mean that Peter doesn't have an integral role of leading the group. As we go forward, we see Peter interacting with Paul. Paul was Saul before, and we're going to talk about him a separate week altogether, okay? He'll have his own probably 2 weeks, I think, if I remember correctly. But Paul's missionary journeys are really to go reach the unsaved, the lost Gentile peoples. And so that means everybody who's not in Jerusalem, that's the Gentiles, okay? And so that's what we call the Europeans at this point. It includes also Africa and Asia and whatever, but Paul didn't go, he went through here, okay? This is his journeys. Peter, instead, once he and Paul actually interacted, I'm not even going to say they became like good friends or anything, but they interacted and they played nice together. Very different personality. I mean, Paul is the Harvard law grad. Peter is I've got tobacco stains in my beard working the fishing boat. They're different worlds. Paul goes on missionary journeys to reach these people, even though he's a master of the Hebrew and the Israel law and the rules and all that stuff. He goes and takes that information and that education, and he reaches the Europeans, the Gentiles. Peter, the one who's the lowly one, as far as like when you're looking, he's not like that nice fancy Pharisee or anything. He becomes the one who reaches the Israelites, the Hebrews, the people there in Israel.
So backwards, right?
It's so backwards. It's so backwards. But God uses people for his purposes, not for what we think. I look at you and I might think, well, you're not going to be nothing but just a gym rat. You're not going to do anything else with your life. But you may be the next president for all I know. Like, God does what he wants with us, and he has a plan, and we don't understand what his plans are. And so for us to stereotype the people and say, oh, well, that's a dirty, stinky fisherman. He ain't going to do nothing, that's for sure. We don't know what God's plans are. God could flip that on its head. That doesn't even mean that Peter still doesn't stink. He could still stink, but he's put him into a place to do a thing. And then when Peter does that thing, it ain't about how awesome Peter is. He didn't have the background and education for that. He didn't go on to Rabbi University, right? So he didn't have the pedigree. So God said, perfect. You don't have it, so I'm going to use you to do it. So then it's not about you. It's about me. I'm going to call you to something greater than what you are. I'm going to train you to do what you never thought you could have done. And he's calling that to our lives too. And Peter later decided that he was not going to die in the same manner as Jesus. They were going to crucify him. And so he said, well, put me upside down then.
And it's the same spot where the St. Peter's Basilica is right now that you can visit at the Vatican. Same exact spot. That's where
in
they
Rome.
built the Basilica.
Mm-hmm.
You can visit where he was crucified, which is pretty cool.
So for somebody who was skeptical, harsh, gruff,
Who would have ever thought he would have been a saint?
who would ever thought that he would be the saint?
I mean, St. Peter. The St. Peter. That tells you God can, or Jesus can use anybody.
God is going to use whoever he uses for his purposes, right? Andrew, his personality says, I'm going to reach out and find you. We later see Andrew, they say, hey, Andrew, weren't you from Bethsaida originally? He's like, yeah. He's like, do you know anybody here? He's like, hold on. He finds Philip. He finds Bartholomew. He is the networker. He is the evangelist. He's the one pulling people in to find Jesus. That's who Andrew is. Peter, he's the skeptic. He's the, I'm not sure I'm on board with this thing. I'm going to think something, and I'm going to say it immediately without contemplating if I should say it or not. I'm going to stick my foot in my mouth. I'm going to act, and then I'm going to say, wait, should we have done that? I'm not real sure. Cut the guy's ear off. That wasn't a good idea. That's Peter, right? I like Peter. He gives me hope for my personality and my affinities and my issues, where I can be, I can be quick to react. I can be gruff. I can stick my foot in my mouth, not read the room very well. What? We're not talking about this? No, Brad, we're not talking about this right now. Well, okay, nobody told me, so sorry, whatever. I can see Peter totally doing that. And I get the feeling that Andrew was younger than Peter. Now remember, his name was actually Simon. Don't forget that. Let me write that down. His name was actually Simon. And Jesus is the one who calls him Peter, which again, it means rock. Rocky. I'm going to call it nickname Rocky. Okay. Now, Rocky is not the same as a foundational boulder rock, right? It's a rock. And so he says Simon, which in the Hebrew, in the Hebrew Greek transliteration that they had, it was probably pronounced Shimon, and it means the one who hears, or the listener. And so Peter listened to Jesus, and eventually he came around, right? And so he was like, that a boy, Rocky. That a boy.
Seems kind of an oxymoron to be a listener and the one who speaks too quickly.
I'm wondering if that's why Jesus gave him the nickname. Because we might, instead of saying Rocky as a nickname, we might say, hey, hardhead. I'm not so sure that Jesus didn't have a sense of humor. I really do think that he
would have to.
So that's Andrew and Peter. We could probably go into more ancillary stuff, but that's what we know from the scriptures. And that's kind of foundational to the group. We're talking about James and John. Those are also brothers. What is their interaction? What's their role? Oh, Daddy's still in the picture. There's all this other stuff going on. So we'll talk about that. So Andrew, Peter, early on, they're from the beginning. Andrew from the beginning, right?
Yeah.
Early on, from the beginning.
You know what's cool?
And then kind of continuing to the very end.
How did Andrew, what became of Andrew?
Do you know what happened to Andrew? I can't remember.
Andrew what's cool about Andrew? Andrew was one of the first that was brought in by Jesus, right? He came from John the Baptist. He was the disciple of John the Baptist, which immediately went over and followed Jesus. But what's cool about Andrew? Andrew was with Jesus the entire time. He was one of the few disciples that was there at the Great Commission. And if you know what the Great Commission is, before Jesus knew he was going to die, the disciples didn't know that he had something called the Great Commission. That's when he used, and it's in Matthew.
Matthew 28.
Yeah, Matthew 28. And he sent them out to make disciples of all the nations. The Bible says Jesus used all the those disciples. And Andrew was there. So Andrew made it from the very beginning all the way to the very end.
Yeah.
And he was commissioned to go out to all nations. So that's pretty cool. Andrew's one of the originals that made it through.
If I'm not mistaken, I think that Andrew ended up going to like India.
You know, I'm trying to find that. And I don't know if it was India or Asia Minor. Man, I'm blind. Can anybody read something for me? Can you read? Can you pull it?
Yeah.
20. I need 16 through 20. Oh, there you can see it.
16.
Yeah, this little paragraph right there.
Read it all.
Yeah, go ahead and read it all. This is
Now,
where Andrew ends up at.
Okay.
now the 11 disciples went to Galilee, to the mountain to which Jesus had directed them. And when they saw him, they worshipped him, but some doubted. And Jesus came and said to them, "All authority in heaven and earth has been given to me. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all that I have commanded you. And behold, I am with you always to the end of the age."
Mm-hmm.
Man, I love that because
Yeah.
Jesus is giving authority to them.
Yeah.
Because he's leaving.
Yeah. I dubbed these
Yeah.
Sir Andrew,
Yeah.
Sir Peter.
But he reminded them, I'll be with you. I'll be
Mm-hmm.
with you in spirit.
Yeah.
That's a good reminder.
Yeah.
He's still with us in spirit.
That's right.
We're one of the only religions that has the Holy Spirit.
Yeah. So, what do you take away from this? What do you take away from this? How does this impact your life? Why even look at this? And I'm not saying you have to answer right now, but those are the kind of questions that you need to ask when you leave a study like this is, how does this affect my life? For me, in studying Andrew, I realized he was already in the game. He just had to follow the right player, right? So he was in the game. He was following John the Baptist. He was getting the right message. And then John the Baptist said, no, Amy, it's that guy. He's like, oh, I'm over here then, right? So I'm going to, he is looking for truth. He's looking for what's right. And he's looking for what's happening right now. Peter is saying, I'm just taking care of myself. I'm just working. I'm just doing my life. And then Jesus comes in, and remember that throw the net on this side.
Yep.
He totally walks away from his biggest haul to go follow Jesus, because for him, he realized there's got to be something more. Like, this is cool, and you know what? I'm not even saying that he maybe had guys, and he was like, "Hey, y'all keep fishing. I'm gonna follow this guy," and he just took off. Maybe they still kept working. I don't know, but he said, "There's something more. There's something deeper here, because I'm a fisherman, and I got skunked. I can't tell you. I don't go fishing. You used to be a fisherman. How many times did you go out and you caught absolutely zero fish?"
More than I have.
And you don't feel good about that. And now, if you're coming in the dock and they were like, "Hey, did you catch anything?" Like, "No, I didn't get anything." And they were like, "Well, just cast right over there." You're like, "Dude, I've been fishing for hours." And you cast over there and you caught a 15-pound bass.
Yeah.
You'd be like, "I don't know who that dude is, but I got to find out more."
And you know, knowing how fish are like structure oriented, literally I've thrown on one side and not caught anything. Thrown on this side, don't know why I caught fish on this side. But the depth finder would reveal there's an underwater creek coming through here. There's an underwater hump that goes like this.
Yeah.
Or there's a ravine. There's things that go underneath
Yeah.
the water we can't see with the eye.
Yeah.
Jesus might have known that.
Oh, yeah.
You know?
Yeah,
There's
absolutely.
a reason why those school of fish were on this side and not that side.
Yeah.
And it could have been a miracle.
Yeah.
But in our world, there's a reason for that.
Sure.
There's some structure down there.
Right.
There's underwater trees down there that's holding fish. So I've had that happen many times.
Mm-hmm. So as we leave tonight, I just want you to ask yourself, and if you're watching online, ask yourself, what do I do leaving? Like, how does this impact me? Like, we looked at the pictures, we talked about the stories, we read some of the Bible. Like, what do I do with this information? Do I need to be more of an Andrew, where I'm seeking truth and trying to follow in the right path? Or do I need to be a Peter and just wait for God to just do a miracle in my life? Or has he done a miracle in my life? And I'm now following him because of that. Am I being faithful to follow him because of what he's done in my life? There's different things. There's different applications. I'm not here. I mean, it's different for every person. That's why we call it the living word, because the Bible applies to everybody where they are. Jesus met them where they were. Jesus didn't say, "Peter, go wash up, scrub your beard, put on some perfume, and then come back and we'll have a conversation. He met him right where he was. Hands covered in slime from the fish, whatever.
Look how he met Saul, or Paul. Look where he was going.
Yeah.
On the road to do what?
To go kill followers of Jesus.
Yes, because I love that what you said. He meets you where you are.
He meets you where you are.
Wherever we are in our life, it's still good enough.
That's right. Still good enough. Thanks for joining us tonight.